All right. Well, thank you. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Whether you're tuning in live or watching the replay, thank you all for joining me today. This is the second workshop in a series that I'm doing this month in support of Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month. And today I'm going to be talking about childhood sexual abuse and incest. So, for those of you who don't know me, just a little bit about myself. My name is Darlene Garcia. I am an advanced grief recovery specialist and a wellness coach, but I'm also a childhood sexual assault survivor. And so I have many reasons for doing this. That is one of them. But the other one is because I'm a grandmother of 9, and one of the things in my life is to always try and protect my kids and my grandkids, and this is one way that I can do that. And in the process of teaching my family, I want to be able to teach everybody else what I know now about sexual assault, and so that we can help to spread awareness and also to promote prevention out there. And basically shatter the silence. This is why I called my series Shatter the Silence. So before I get into the topic at hand, I always like to start off with a disclaimer. Again, I am an advanced certified grief recovery specialist and wellness coach. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a licensed clinician, such as a psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist, or counselor. So the tips and the tools that I share with you through these workshops are not guaranteed to take away your pain, and just anything that anyone does to help a person, right? Everyone always has to take active participation for themselves in order to see results. So can healing be achieved? Is healing possible? Yes, it is. I am a true walking testament that healing from sexual assault is possible, provided that you actively participate in your healing. I also like to set the tone for safety. And the way I do that is to have some of these commitments out there so that we're all on the same page as I talk about these very difficult things that most people, would not want to talk about. The first one is to keep an open mind. My approach to talking about sexual assault, sexual abuse, incest is to take the approach of looking at it from a different perspective. And so I ask you to keep an open mind, because many of the things that I'm going to talk about, you may have already heard. You probably are doing them yourself as well today, if you are a sexual assault survivor or know someone that is. But there are also some concepts that I might be talking about today that you may not have heard before. And so I'd like to ask you all to keep an open mind. The other one is to be honest with yourself. And what I mean by honest is emotional honesty. So, again, a very tough subject to talk about, and it could bring up some human emotions. And so I ask that you just be present with your emotions and allow yourself to feel them as I go through the presentation. The next commitment is don't judge or don't compare, right? Especially yourself. Don't judge yourself. We do that so often in our lives. Also, every single person that goes through a traumatic experience, even though experiences could be very similar, they're relatable, but they are also very unique to each of us. And I'll explain that as I go through this presentation. So I ask that as I go through this, please do not judge others or don't judge yourself, and don't compare situations. The thing about comparing is that we end up minimizing how we truly feel about a situation or about something that has happened to us. And so I ask that you just be kind and give yourself grace. I also ask that you just be human. What do I mean by that? If you find yourself crying, feeling your heart racing, just take deep breaths, but just be human. Don't intellectualize anything that I say to you today, but really just process it from an emotional perspective. And then just some technical things, you know, I ask that everybody stay muted through the presentation. I will give you an opportunity at the end if you'd like to ask questions. You can definitely type your questions in the chat if you'd like to, and then I will answer them at the end of the presentation. I'm literally going to go through this presentation so that I can get to questions at the end, or if anyone would like to share their story, I will also open it up for that as well. And then the last one is just to be respectful of others. And I always just end with that. And it encompasses everything that I just talked about here with these commitments. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get into what we're here to talk about. So the subject at hand today is incest and sexual abuse. So incest is sexual contact between close blood relatives, brothers and sisters, parents and children, grandparents and grandchildren, aunts and uncles, nieces and nephews, right? So any sexual contact with blood relatives. Some places around the world, incest is not a crime. It's actually acceptable, right? And I'm not here, none of us are here to judge any of that. We're just here to learn, right, the differences between the two. Surprisingly, as I was doing some research, I actually found that there were 2 states within the US that incest is not a crime. I'm not sure if you guys know that, but New Jersey and Rhode Island actually allow incestuous relationships. They just don't allow marriage. And I think it's in Rhode Island, it's the age of 16, and in New Jersey, it's the age of 18. So I was actually quite surprised when I saw that. Incest becomes sexual abuse when there is no consent and when it involves a child. If you were on my workshop last week, you remember that I said that a child cannot consent to any form of sexual activity, period, right? A child cannot consent to any form of sexual activity, period. I also talked about the different types of sexual abuse or sexual assault. And it doesn't matter, whatever you call it, this is sexual violence against another human being that brings on traumatic feelings and reactions, and is definitely life-changing for the abused. Right, so everything that we're going to be talking about today is going to be focused on child sexual abuse, keeping in mind that when it comes to situations with family members, it is also incest. Okay. All right. As a parent and as a grandparent, honestly, I don't even like to think about the possibility of my children or my grandchildren being abused or assaulted. I want to think that child sexual abuse, sexual violence in general, is something that happens in other places far away from where my family lives, right? I'm sure many of you can agree with me on that. Child sexual abuse is such a dreadful subject that many of us, including myself, for many years, chose to look the other way and not deal with the harsh reality that this is all around us. But we can't turn the other way. Why? Because it's all over the news. It's all over social media. Every single day, you'll see someone posting about a person who was found molesting or raping a child, right? So it doesn't matter where you live, what religion is prevalent in your area, what local or what political party your town embraces. Child predators are there, okay? And child sexual abuse is likely already occurring. It might hurt us to think about that. Like I said, I don't even like to think about it. But there's an American novelist by the name of Flannery O'Connor who once wrote that the truth does not change according to our ability to stomach it. The truth does not change according to our ability to stomach it. So if we ignore the facts about the prevalence of child sexual abuse, we put our children at more risk. We need to face the harsh reality, guys, head on if we want to create a positive change. Okay, so let's look at what some of these harsh realities are. There's data out there that shows that 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls are being sexually abused every single day. Abuse occurs most often by someone we know and trust. This is why I not only am talking about child sexual abuse, but I also brought in incest, right? Because, like I mentioned before, parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, cousins, a lot of times they are the abusers. Abuse often occurs in places that we feel the safest: our churches, our schools, our families' homes, and even worse, our own homes, right in our own homes. Okay? Don't close your eyes. Don't look the other way. Adult men are not the only perpetrators. Women can also be perpetrators. Children, guys, children can also be perpetrators. Okay, so it is so important for us to face these harsh realities around child sexual abuse. So why do the victims, the survivors, stay silent? The most common reason why victims do not speak up is the feeling of shame. Shame is a natural reaction to being violated or abused. In fact, abuse by its very nature is humiliating and dehumanizing, right? The sense of shame can carry over to victims blaming themselves, self-blame, right? Blaming themselves for the actions of their perpetrator. I remember when this happened to me, I literally sat there and thought about it afterwards. Is this my fault? Was this my punishment for arguing with my mom, for not going with her into the store? Was this my fault because I kept my door unlocked and my windows down? Was this my fault because I had my legs up on the dashboard? So that meant that I invited him to touch me? We blame ourselves. This feeling of being responsible for what happened is what causes the abused to not speak up sooner. When people feel ashamed, they hide. It's a common reaction. This concept of isolation sets victims apart from the crowd, translating to low rates of reporting cases of assault. Another reason some victims don't speak up is because traumatic experiences can sometimes scramble your memories. And when the assault first happens, it's difficult. It's a difficult topic, right, to speak about. Over time, these memories become fragmented. So it's not done on purpose, right? Our human brain naturally struggles to cope with traumatic events. Stigmatization. The stigmatization of sexual assault in our society causes many victims to shy away from reporting their assault. Our society features a rape culture or sexual abuse culture where we normalize and excuse this type of behavior. It happens globally, you guys. Many people that blame victims, right? So we're now victim blaming. Many people that blame victims will usually say she asked for it. Or maybe if she wasn't wearing that, it wouldn't have happened to her. Things like that people would say. This kind of thinking instantly marginalizes the victim making it harder for them to speak up. The victim will not feel comfortable speaking up if they feel that society is blaming them for their assault. And it happens every day. Fear. Many victims live in fear, right? It's another reason why they don't report their abuse. They fear retaliation from their perpetrators or from the perpetrators' families. That has happened too. In our society, so much of what should be openly considered abuse is normalized. So when people say that they've been abused, their experiences are not recognized as traumatic. Sometimes they're simply brushed off as normal or minimized as, well, it could have been worse. I know I told myself that, and I heard people say that too. At least you didn't get raped. At least he didn't kidnap you. At least he didn't kill you. This makes a person feel even more invalidated, hence more traumatized. Some victims also refrain from speaking up about their assault because they believe that their abuser will not face any consequences, right? The inadequacies of our legal system and the weaknesses of them. According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, also known as the RAIN organization, say that out of every 1,000 rapes, 994 perpetrators will walk free in the United States. So when we sit back and we think about why victims, why survivors don't say anything, sometimes for years, these are some of the reasons. I'm sure there are so much more, but these are some of the very, very general, but also very strong reasons why victims end up staying silent. So let's talk about the cultural, familial, and societal challenges that victims and survivors face. Cultural challenges. Understanding the concept of child sexual assault continues to be a challenge in many cultures. We know around the globe in many different countries, there are cultures that already groom their young children to be married, right? They already have the bride and groom picked out for each other, and they're already courting them at such a young age, right? This is where incest is normal. There's nothing wrong with it, right? And even though the bride or the groom don't love each other, they love someone else, it doesn't matter. If that is what the culture says that they have to do, they conform. Right? Child brides, you see that all the time. There are parents that are out there that are literally giving their daughters in exchange for money or safety. Right? So that happens culturally. Child sexual abuse, that is not a concept that people would understand. Some cultures see women and children, most especially girls, as lower classes than men, and there are strict rules around how they should dress or how they should act. And when they don't conform, in many cases, they're punished, and their punishment a lot of times is in the form of sexual violence, right? The girls deserved to be abused. It's their belief system. Children are regarded as property of their parents, right? In this case, kids don't have a voice. They're told to do and not ask questions. And a lot of times there are parents that will take advantage of that and think, these are my children. I will do what I want with them, including sexual abuse. Separation and divorce of parents is a major factor in child sexual assault cases due to the absence of one parent. You know, I have heard many stories from real life people that have told me that they were abused by their stepfather, their stepbrother, step uncles, and the other parents not around to protect them. That's real. Perpetrators are well known or have high stature in the community. How many times have you read stories of famous people or wealthy people that have committed crimes of sexual assault and abuse? And social media is out there criticizing the victim, right? Because they're idolize this famous person. Stigmas is another challenge that a lot of survivors and victims face, right? I talked about that in last week's workshop. Stigmas are misinformation, and they also come from a place of old beliefs, right? Old beliefs. Stigmas are created from old beliefs. And so these are carried on from generation to generation. And a lot of times what worked many, many years ago, it doesn't work today. And so these stigmas are continuing to still be seen as true in our societies. But listen, you guys, you don't know what you don't know, right? There's so much about child sexual abuse, about incest, about sexual assault and trauma in general. We have the World Wide Web at our fingertips. I didn't know all this stuff when this happened to me at the age of 12. I didn't know it when I turned 20 or 30. I only learned a lot about this stuff after my husband died because of the work I had to do around grief and loss. And it was then that I had the courage to come out with my story and learn other people's stories because of it and realize just how bad this really is, guys. Right? So there is nothing that says that you have to conform to cultural beliefs, to what society says is true, or even family traditions or beliefs. Right? If it doesn't work for you, find what does. Okay, find what does so that you can begin your healing journey. Last week, I talked a little bit about why families side with the perpetrator. So today I'm calling it something a little bit different. It's called lack of family support. I'm going to dive into this a little bit more than I did last week. In many cases, family members are simply not willing or able to look at the awful truth, denial, right? They do not have the strength or the willingness to accept that sexual abuse was perpetrated within the family. They just don't want to believe it. But once their eyes are open to the truth, that means that they would have to be obligated to deal with its implications. This is why many family members will stay in denial. Even in cases where families believe that abuse was perpetrated or abusers admit or are found guilty of their crimes, denial allows family members to minimize its importance. They'll never discuss it again, right? Sweep it under the carpet. Let's not talk about it. It's too uncomfortable, right? It's not that big a deal. It's over. He went to jail, right? Whatever they say. Abuse in their own past. Where there is one sexual abuse victim in the family, there are often more. Significantly, it's important to consider that some family members may have also been abused by the same perpetrator or someone else in the family. While some fellow victims may be inspired by the survivor to come forward about their own trauma, others can be even more reluctant to look at family abuse because it brings up pain, their pain, that they're not ready to address. The very family members who survivors turn to for help are often limited by their own unresolved sexual trauma histories. And if they cannot face their own pain, then they're less likely to show support and show compassion for others. So having abuse in their own past. Fear of the abuser is a very common one. I've heard this one a lot. Some family members are afraid of an abuser's wrath if confronted due to their intimidating personality and or history of emotional abuse or violence. Their safety might be in jeopardy, or even acknowledge the survivor's claims, right? If they stand up and acknowledge the survivor's claims, right? So this could be, an elderly in the family, and everyone listens to them or highly respects them, and you just can't go against them no matter what, right? So there's fear. Everyone in the family fears this person, and so you're not going to get the support from your family because of that fear. The darkest reason people side with abusers and against victims is defensiveness due to the fact that they, too, are perpetrators. Many sexual offenders were abused themselves. And because abuse frequently spreads through families, it is likely that if there's one sexual abuser in a family, there will be more. There will be more. Okay, so to wrap this section up, you guys, sexual abuse perpetrates itself within families, especially if kept hidden and not appropriately acknowledged or addressed. When victims are too scared to tell, when others fail to believe or protect them, when perpetrators are not held accountable and parties are unable to heal, sexual abuse survives and thrives. Its reach extends to multiple branches of families and communities, inflicting damage and destruction generation after generation. It's a harsh reality that many families face. I've heard so many stories of someone who was sexually abused and then found out that their mom, their grandma, their brother, their uncle is also sexually abused, right? It manifests itself and it continues to survive and thrive in the family. This is why I'm so passionate about bringing this out into the open. This isn't about going out there and accusing people of being a perpetrator, an abuser. This is not about that. This is about educating others. It's about teaching people that healing is possible, because healing isn't just the victim, healing is the family as well, right? That abuse started someplace, and it probably happened generations ago, right? You've heard of generational sin, kind of similar, right? Something that continues to happen in a family will continue to happen until somebody stops it, brings light to the fact that this isn't working anymore. This is why I call this Shatter the Silence. It's so important to protect the children now and the children of the future. So how do we recognize the signs in our children? It's not easy, guys. It is not easy to recognize and spot the signs of sexual abuse, as the offender will do everything in their power to hide their actions, like telling the child that it's okay, or by scaring them, right? threatening them, bribing them, manipulating them. Nightmares are one way that you can recognize if your child could be being abused by someone, right? Especially if the nightmares are consistent, maybe a specific type of nightmare. Change in appetite, right? They don't want to eat, or they're eating too much. It's not the norm for them. They're scared of going to certain people, places, or activities, right? Their abuser could be in a certain place and they don't want to be around that. They're uncomfortable. They're scared for their life. Mood swings, rage, anger, fear, anxiety, insecure, withdrawn. These are very big indications, right? That something is going on with your child. They're not normal feelings to have, right? This is a cry for help. Depression is another one, right? Especially if they're really young. Young children shouldn't be getting depressed. Something is going on with them if they're starting to get depressed. Something happened to them. Aggression is another one. You know, especially if that's not their normal character, their normal behavior. Feeling shameful or guilty about anything. Isolating themselves, right? Not wanting to be around others, especially if they were always wanting to be around others and all of a sudden now they're isolating, right? You got to look at the behavior changes that are happening in the kids. Withdrawal from certain person, right? Why are they withdrawing from that person? What happened? Resisting or removing clothes when it's appropriate, right? At bedtime, when it's time to change into pajamas, it's time to go into the shower. What are they trying to hide? What are they afraid of? Their grades are going down. They're not focused in school, right? But they used to be straight A students. They exhibit adult sexual behavior, knowledge, and language, especially the really young kids. Where did they learn that from? Right? Start paying attention to these key things in your children. Always listen to your instincts. If you think something is not feeling right or that your child's behavior is a little different than usual or a lot different than usual, then always trust your gut and watch the signs. It could be something that you find by being with your child, by asking them questions, by giving them that safe space to talk, letting them know that you are safe, that they can tell you anything. Let's talk about the adolescents, right? The teenagers. Some of their signs are a little bit different, right? They can still display some of those other ones that I talked about, but let's add a few more here, right? Eating disorders, right? I have heard stories from some of the clients that I've worked with that have said, I got myself fat because when I was slim, that's when I was abused. But I figured that if I got myself fat and ugly, that I wouldn't be attractive anymore and they wouldn't hurt me. Right? Self-injury, cutting, things like that. Right? You got to look at that. It's not normal. Don't say that it's just, oh, typical teenagers. No, it's not. What I've learned through my journey is that emotional pain cannot be healed like physical pain, right? You can't just put a Band-Aid on something and then it heals up. Not with emotional pain. You know, you can't just take a painkiller and your emotional pain will go away. It doesn't work that way. So a lot of times people that are suffering from emotional trauma will hurt themselves because they'd rather feel the physical pain over the emotional pain. Drug and alcohol abuse, right? As teenagers, they have more access to this stuff. And in grief recovery, we call this short-term energy relieving behaviors, or STIRBs, right? People will use drugs and alcohol to self-medicate so that they don't think about the traumatic experience that they've had. And over time, it can become an addiction, right? Promiscuous activity. I've heard so many stories from women that suffered from rape or sexual abuse when they were younger and became promiscuous for different reasons. You know, I have a friend, her name is Madeline Black, and she wrote this book called Unbroken. You can find it on Amazon. She's from the UK, and she was gang raped when she was a teenager. It's all in her book. And, you know, I remember the first time that I spoke to her and she found out about what I did. She goes, "Gosh, Darlene, I wish I knew you back then." I mean, she's much older than me, so you know, we kind of laughed about it because I probably wasn't even born, or maybe it was just a little kid back then. But the work that I did around grief recovery is what she meant, that she could have used that as she was struggling to heal from that gang rape. But she became promiscuous because she felt that if she just said yes and gave into it, that they wouldn't rape her. Like, she didn't want to be raped, so she said, I might as well just do it so that they don't hurt me in that way, right? That's one of the reasons that the victims and the survivors engage in promiscuous activity. Running away. If your abuser is at home, many teenagers will say, forget this, I'm out, right? And they're going to run away. Why is your kid running away? Why don't they feel safe being in your home? Why aren't they happy? Right? It doesn't always necessarily have to be what's happening in the home, but you got to find out, because that's not normal, right? The home should be the safest place for your kids to want to be. They become suicidal. It's just like self-injury, right? Emotional pain can be so painful and so deep and never ends that a lot of times suicide for many is the only answer that they can come up with. Depression and anxiety. Even adolescents shouldn't be suffering from depression and anxiety. What are they going through that they are suffering from that? Right? Fear, you know, they have triggers, right? They jump at every little thing. They're scared of things that they never used to be scared of before, right? And just like the younger kids, academic problems, right? They were great students, always paid attention to their schoolwork, and now all of a sudden their grades have took a deep, deep dive, right? So these are some of the signs that are very common in adolescence. Now let's look at some of the signs that an adult who may be sexually abusing your child display. Okay, listen up closely, please. The abuser is giving your child special attention. And especially if that's not normal, you might want to take a look at that. Trying to spend a lot of time alone with your child. Right? Why? Buying your child expensive gifts or giving them money. Is that unusual? Do they do that with all the kids or just your kid? Treating a child as a favorite from other children. Physical affection towards your child, kissing, hugging, holding hands, or wanting to be very close to your child. Talk a little bit more about this in the next slide. Is unduly protective of the child or severely limits the child's contact with other children, especially of the opposite sex. Again, who is this adult and why are they protective over your kid? And especially why with the opposite sex, right? Could we maybe say that, oh, well, you know what? This is my child's godfather and he's just concerned because, you know, she's young and we're not ready for her to have a boyfriend yet. So he's just being protective over her, right? That could be true too. But you never want to close your eyes to this possibility, okay? Is secretive and isolated. I know we never want to think that anyone in our family is the abuser, But again, remember, most abusers are someone that we know and trust, someone that our child knows and trusts. Sexual grooming. This is what they call it when an abuser is building trust, building up that relationship with the child to eventually sexually abuse them, right? So the first thing they do is they choose a victim, right? They choose a victim. So sexual grooming involves an adult befriending a child with the motive of committing sexual abuse. The process is slow, methodical, and intentional. It involves developing a close emotional connection, right? So building trust. And sometimes this can take place over weeks, months, or even years, right? So it doesn't just happen overnight, guys. It's a long, drug out process sometimes. Remember, methodical, slow, and intentional, okay? It's important for parents to be able to understand the grooming process to avoid your child from being sexually abused. When the predator, like that word, when the abuser chooses their victim, right? Obviously, a lot of times they're going to choose a child that is more vulnerable. Sometimes they're going to choose a child that is low in confidence or withdrawn, emotionally deprived, maybe not getting a lot of attention from their parents. So that's a good way to get them to trust them and, get them to love them more because they're paying more attention to them, right? Their parental supervision is very little, and so they have more access to the child. When they're building access and trust to your kid, they begin the friendship with them, right? They start to buy them gifts and take them places and do favors for them, right? Kids love that stuff, right? Kids want attention. Who doesn't like gifts? Who doesn't like people to do favors for them, right? So if there's an adult out there, anybody out there, that your kid is going to get what they want, why wouldn't they trust them and get closer to them, right? The groomer will also actively try to isolate the child from people who may be watchful or helpful, right? This kind of isolation creates a deeper connection and or dependency on them. There's a lot of manipulation that happens in this area, right? Let's tell secrets. Tell me about your day. No, your parents are too busy. I'll listen. Right? Don't worry about it. I'm here for you. Right? Encourages the child to tell them their secrets because they're safe. They're not going to tell their mom or dad about it. Right? So they go and they isolate. Start, meeting alone so that the child can trust them. Sexualizing or desensitizing to touch. What does that mean? This is the stage before the actual abuse. The abuser increases non-sexual touching that will prepare the child for abuse. This may include hugs, snuggles, and tickling. The offender creates situations with nudity involved sometimes, right? Swimming, massaging, taking baths, depending on how young or old the child is, right? And a lot of times it gets to a place where they create this natural curiosity, and then they start to use sexual stimulation to excite the child, and then they advance the abuse. Secrecy and maintaining control. The offender uses emotional blackmail and blame to continue to be sexual and maintain secrecy of the relationship. They'll warn the child that no one will believe them. And if they open up, they could get in trouble. Or they can even go to the place of, I will hurt your family if you say anything, right? So just depending on who it is, how much power they have. Sexual grooming is something that is not talked about a lot, right? So this is super important for you guys to understand that, again, it is a slow process, it is methodical, and it is intentional, right? I can't stress that enough. Please watch the signs. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. See how I'm doing on time here. Okay. Okay, so we're got to be wrapping up here soon. So awareness and prevention, right? So this is these are some key things that I want to give you guys to take away. Start, right? We want to start by talking to your kids. Start by talking to your kids. And there are some resources that I'm going to share at the end, because it has to be age appropriate, and you have to be able to connect with your child. You can't just talk to a 4-year-old about sexual abuse. They're not going to get that, right? They're not going to understand that. But you definitely want to start communication with your child as early as they start talking, to be able to open up those lines of communication so that they always trust you, right? To be able to tell you anything. Discourage secret keeping at home, right? Develop a safe space where children can openly communicate. Again, this has to start from the earliest of ages, you guys, right? Don't treat your children like they're any less human than an adult, right? I get it. Kids love to talk, especially when they start talking, right? In their toddler age. It's just like, can you just be quiet for like 5 minutes, you know? But kids love to talk. They love to chatter. They love to, be dramatic and, share how they feel, like they're there in the present moment all the time. And when we don't pay attention to them, it starts to discourage them from wanting to talk to you. Or if they tell you something and you tell them that that's not how they should feel or how they should act, and we start to judge them and not allow them to be who they are, they will be discouraged from telling you anything, right? How often do we see our kids and they grow up? I mean, I'm a product of that too, right? When I used to ask my kids growing up, and they became teenagers, and then I would ask them, well, what's wrong? Nothing. You okay? Yeah, I'm fine. They weren't. I knew they weren't. I could see it all over their face, but I'll admit I wasn't a perfect parent, and I did not a lot of times provide that safe space for my kids to talk openly and honestly without being judged, right? So you want to make sure at the earliest of ages, you discourage having secrets in the home, that you guys are open and honest, and that you allow your children also to be expressive and open and honest. Educate yourself on grooming and warning signs, right? I just gave you a bunch of those, but guys, you can find a lot of this stuff on the internet as well. Start researching and looking at these things. There could be other things that are maybe a little bit more descriptive than what I shared with you. These are basic things that I shared. Educate your children about appropriate and inappropriate touch, right? From the earliest of ages. I mean, I remember talking to my kids about their private parts, and nobody should be touching those places on themselves, right? Other than them, or, like us, if we're helping them take a shower. But as they get older, they do that themselves, right? So again, age appropriate in how you communicate with them. Know your children's teachers, coaches, caretakers, friends, parents, and other significant adults involved in their lives. I can't tell you how many times when my kids were growing up that, a lot of their friends, their parents just were not present, not present. We always love to have our kids as friends come around, but we didn't always know all their parents, you know. Um, but if our kids were going to go to their house, guaranteed that we were going to meet their parents. Absolutely, right? So teachers and coaches, right? Who who are they? Do you know them? Do you get involved in your kids' activities? Right? These are important to know. Don't turn a blind eye. Right? Do not hesitate to make regular unannounced visits when your child is alone with other adults. Very important. Do not hesitate to make regular unannounced visits when your child is alone with other adults. This is super important, you guys. You got to put that message loud and clear out there that those other adults, you got your eye on them, right? Even if they aren't looking to do that, you don't know that for sure, right? So you got to protect your kids. Learn the policies of your children's organizations, right? If your kids are in dance, or like my granddaughter, she's in cheerleading, you know, if they're learning some sort of martial arts, or they're going to school and they're like in school clubs or whatever, who are their advisors? You know, what are they doing? Where are they going? Who are they with? You got to learn all of these different policies. What policies do they have in place? You know, when the kids are there, is your child going to be alone with just one person? Are there two adults? Is there one adult? Is there more than one kid in the room at all times? Should you be asking these questions? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Monitor your child or your children's online activity, right? Children can be groomed online through websites, games, apps, and social media platforms. You know, this is the way kids play. It's the way kids communicate nowadays, right? The World Wide Web, it's at their fingertips. Make sure that you're monitoring that closely, right? And then speak up when you see anything suspicious happening. Trust your gut. Trust your gut. Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the adults that have suffered from unresolved childhood trauma. Okay, so I'm going to go run through this one quickly for the sake of time. So, every single human being has unresolved issues from childhood. We all do, you guys, we all do. We construct narratives, right, based on our experiences with our parents and or the adults in our lives, and we learn coping mechanisms in order to survive. Unfortunately, unless someone taught us how to deal with emotions in a healthy way, right? I learned this very late in my life. Only after my husband died did I learn how to deal with human emotions in a healthy way. We carry these unhealthy coping mechanisms with us into our adulthood, and we repeat what we don't repair. Let me repeat that again. We repeat what we don't repair. So unresolved childhood trauma can show up in adulthood in many different ways, right? In many different ways. First one, lack of boundaries, right? A lot of times we're not taught, right, how to have boundaries. If you were sexually abused as a child, where were the boundaries? There were no boundaries, right? This is why a lot of girls become promiscuous later on in life, because they weren't taught boundaries and they experience a traumatic event of sexual abuse, right? Disregard for personal needs or self-care. A lot of times self-worth, self-love, self-care goes down the drain when you're sexually abused because it's demoralizing, it's dehumanizing, it's embarrassing, so much shame around that. And so eventually we carry that into our adulthood and we just have no regard for ourselves. We don't love ourselves enough, right? Why should we? No one else really loved us enough to protect us and keep us safe. Health problems, right? Particularly gut issues, right? So pay attention to that. Health problems are big in anybody that suffers from unhealed trauma, unhealed human emotions, because emotions reside in the physical body. And so if we don't heal from the bad stuff, they stay inside. They definitely wreak havoc inside our bodies. Commitment or follow through with issues. You know, if you suffered from some sort of sexual trauma in your life and you realize, gosh, I have a hard time with committing to anything or following through with stuff. I'm all over the place, right? Maybe you suppressed a lot of this stuff and you thought, I've been living my life pretty well. I'm okay. But you're suffering from some of these things. It could be a lot of the childhood trauma that's still bleeding into your adulthood. And you just don't realize that that's what it is. Okay. Unhealthy attraction or dating patterns, right? I had, some clients that talked to me about this and how they attracted, the abusers always, right? Because they still had that unresolved, unhealed traumatic event that continues to affect their behavior and attract abuse, right? What we repeat what we don't repair. I was trying to, I got tongue tied. We repeat what we don't repair, right? So we don't heal, we don't repair from that childhood trauma. We continue to attract it back into our lives. Anxiety and depression, right? I hear a lot of people that talk about having panic attacks or suffering from depression and have been taking medication for years. Okay, that's not normal when you suffer from depression and anxiety. This is your body telling you that you have something unhealed inside of you. What is it? Even if it was repressed memories, still unhealed, right? And as we peel off the layers of the onion to heal, a lot of times those repressed memories will surface. And now we know these were the deepest, darkest parts of us that we need to heal from. So eventually that will happen. The unconscious need to fix, save, or rescue others. I've seen a lot of people that do that, right? Form organizations or do these things because they want to help others because no one helped them. And I get that. But if you've never healed your own trauma, you're going to suffer burnout. You're going to suffer triggers because other people's traumatic events are going to bring back yours as well, right? So sometimes we think that we're healing because we're helping others and we're sharing this part of us, but please remember the healing first before we go out and help others, right? We have to help ourselves before we can help others from a very deep place. Eating disorders, right? Teenagers suffer from this a lot, but it translates into our adult life if we don't repair from that. Again, trauma, grief, it's cumulative and it's cumulatively negative. And so as we continue to do things to self-medicate and to mask, and more trauma and more losses come into our life, it just continues to compound on top of each other. That's what happens with eating disorders. Okay. People pleasing. We think that, if we are pleasing everybody, we're not going to get hurt, right? Or they're not going to know about our pain that we had in our past. I just want to love on everybody. I just want to please everybody. I just want to make people happy. I don't want anyone to experience what I experienced. I just want people to be happy, right? But what about you? Right? You need to be happy too from the deepest parts of you. Okay. You become passive aggressive. You just keep dealing with things until you explode, right? We have an analogy in grief recovery that's called, the steam from the tea kettle or from the pressure cooker. Eventually these things, these human emotions are going to need to come out somewhere, and they're going to come out in spurts of aggression, of anger, of triggers that happen in your life. Okay. Addictions, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we call this short-term energy relieving behaviors or STIRBs, right? Working. I know a lot of people that just keep working, getting degree after degree after degree, or really getting into addictions of alcohol, right? Of drugs, food, sex, all of these things, any type of things that we do to self-medicate or numb, and we do this for short periods of time, but we do them frequently, they eventually become addictions, right? So do you have an addictive behavior? Are you doing things that are unhealthy in your life, right? Food is the number one addiction. People don't realize it because, it's not illegal to eat. But obesity, right, is huge across the globe. It used to be really big in America, but it's across the globe now, right? So food is the number one addiction in the world. And a lot of that is because people have unhealed emotions, unhealed trauma. A lot of that comes all the way back to our childhood. And so when you think about sexual trauma, right, the inhumane way that you were treated, what parts of that did you carry into your adult life? Are you married? Do you have kids? Right? What parts of yourself can you heal so that you can be more present for your families? Right? Repressing, suppressing, ignoring, masking what happened to you does not work forever, guys. You are using up all of your energy to do that when you can use your energy to heal. Healing is possible, right? Walking proof of that. The truth will always be the truth, even if no one believes it. I found this online and I just had to put this out there because so much of the sexual assault, the sexual abuse, the childhood traumas that people go through is because adults have a hard time believing kids. I don't know why, but they do, right? The truth will always be the truth, even if no one believes it. It's your truth. It's your truth. Okay, we're here towards the end. So I wanted to share some resources with you really quickly. If you have suffered from sexual abuse, sexual assault, you know someone that has, there's a National Sexual Assault Hotline, 1-800-656-HOPE or 4673. The RAIN organization that I talked about a little bit earlier, some of the stats that I shared, a lot of the information that I had in the slides today also come from the RAIN organization. That is Rape, Assault, Incest National Network Organization. That's what it stands for. And there's a lot of information that they have on their website. You know, I encourage you guys to check that out. For those of you that are on Guam, the Guam Coalition, Guam Sexual Abuse Coalition. I think I might be missing a word there, but it's the Guam Sexual Assault Coalition. I'll give you guys the right email website. I think that might be the wrong one, but I'll give that to you through email. The other one is the Guam Police Department. They have a task force. It's called Domestic Assault Response Team. I spoke with Officer Tiff Paulino the other day, and she gave me this information. You know, people can call them on their at their phone number 671-475-8540, and you can report your abuse anonymously, or you can email them at dart@gpd.guam.gov. The other resources that I have here is the storybook. I talked to you about the kids and talking to them. It's got to be age appropriate, right? This book here called Some Secrets Should Never Be Kept by Janine Sanders is a great way to introduce inappropriate touching to your very young children. Kidslivsafe.com, they have a child safety ebook, a lot of information in there. Victor Pacini, he is a sexual assault survivor as well. And he has an organization out there called the Victor Pacini Organization. But what he does is he goes out there and he practices Aaron's Law. If you've never heard of Aaron's Law was first introduced in Illinois. Aaron, I forget her last name, she was sexually abused as a child. And so she went out there and she shared her story and she inspired so many. And because of her story, Illinois went out there and they passed a law for the schools to literally talk about child sexual abuse in the schools. And so Aaron's Law Solution ebook that Victor Pacini shares is all about the age appropriate ways to talk to kids. So if you're a teacher or if you're a parent, that book is a really good book to read. When I downloaded it, and you can go to victorpaccini.com and download it, it's free. By the way, even that child safety ebook by kidslivsafe.com is also free. If you download those ebooks, Victor Paccini also shares 3 videos. I've already gotten 2 from him. I'm waiting for the 3rd one, but he will share 3 videos. And so he really kind of breaks it down and talks a little bit about how his programs work. Now, his programs are not free. And I like to encourage like teachers or schools to really look at doing this, and maybe uh, working together with like the parent organizations, the parent teacher organizations in your school. But really, guys, what I'm doing here is just planting the seed. There's so many resources out there. How do I know that? Because I went out there and did my own research. Like I said, I've got 9 grandchildren, and I'm going to do everything in my power to protect my grandchildren from not having to ever experience what I experienced in my life, right? And I hope that you feel the same passionately about your kids or your grandkids, or if you're a teacher, your students, right? Or if you're a coach, your kids, right? That you coach. But together, is the only way that we can make this work, right? We need to grow this message far and wide, and start planting the seeds that it's okay to talk about this stuff. It's definitely encouraged and necessary to be aware, to have eyes wide open, to take those blinders off, to not ignore the fact that this can be right there in your own home, in your backyard, within your family, right? Don't blink an eye, because it is, right? It's very real. And I believe that you're on this call because you may know someone, or you may be a survivor yourself. So I want you to know that you're not alone in this, and that the healing is definitely possible. So what can I do to help you? Right. So, again, I'm an advanced grief recovery specialist. I did this work for myself after my husband, Frank, died, but I learned that there are over 40 losses or loss events that we experience as human beings. And one of them, sexual abuse, sexual assault, right, that bring on feelings of grief. So that the program that I teach for the adults really does help you to recognize what childhood traumas did you have in your life, not just the sexual abuse, but anything that you suffered from your life. I am still working through a lot of the different areas of my life. Like, there were some repressed memories that I had no idea that were there, that are slowly coming to the surface as I'm peeling off the layers of the onion with my healing, right? Your healing journey is a lifelong journey, right? Because as long as we're living, we're going to suffer from grief and loss in our life. And so you'll have the ability to learn the tools to effectively heal your heart from any losses that you've suffered from your life. It's action-based, and it's amazing. Again, I used it for myself. It's super powerful. I continue to use it in my life. We also have a program called Helping Children with Loss. So it's not about me teaching the kids, but it's about me teaching the adults, so that they can be fully present and know how to communicate with kids that have suffered from grief and loss. Okay, so those are the programs that I teach. In addition, I'm a wellness coach, and so I really help people to go from what I like to call recovery to discovery. So a lot of times when we suffer from huge changes, losses, traumatic events in our life, it changes us. It changes our perceptions of life. It changes who we are. And so where do we go after that, right? After you're done healing, or you've experienced already that healing, you feel a lot lighter. Perceptions have changed. Who am I now? What do I do? Right. So my coaching programs will help you to go from that healing phase, that recovery phase, into discovering who you are, so you become the best version of yourself, whatever that is for you. I'm 50, so I'm really focused on staying healthy and active. Like I said, I have 9 grandkids. I can't say that enough. I'm super proud to be a grandma, and I love my grandkids dearly. But man, they are active, and so I cannot get or feel old, or otherwise I'm not going to be able to keep up with them, especially the boys. And so I have a wellness club, and again, with my grief journey, I learned that human emotions reside in the body, and so a lot of the physical conditions, medical conditions, things that we experience in our life is because of unhealed trauma, unhealed losses or human emotions that we need to heal from, and it creates havoc inside our bodies. And so I teach people how to heal from the inside out through these programs. So that is me in a nutshell. I would love to talk to any one of you if you're interested in healing, or you know someone that needs some sort of healing in their life from the sexual abuse that they have suffered as a child, or maybe you're a parent that is going through your own grief because your child suffered from sexual abuse. You too are grieving, and you also deserve healing. And so I can help you in that process as well. So I always am open to be a heart with ears with people. I do free consultations all the time. I'll send you all of this information through email together with the recording. I'd love to have you guys. I'd be honored to hear your story and talk to you a little bit more about what I do, and see if I can help you in whatever place you are in your life. So with that, I am going to stop the recording.